it's just really with a heavy heart to tell everyone that Kev passed away earlier today. John, what happened?
So we knew that he had some health problems. Kevin, for people that didn't know, Kevin had a lot of health problems, and they were serious. They were like life-threatening problems, and because of his sort of unique disposition, he chose to not take them seriously, to the dismay of many, many people in his life, like his immediate family. And unfortunately, because of his sort of reluctant nature to be very forthcoming about anything, let alone something so serious, there was just a lot of speculation. Earlier today, he had some problems. I believe he couldn't feel his hands. And someone came to check on him, and he was already sort of exasperated and whatnot. And they worked on him in his apartment in Queens, and they were just unable to save him, unfortunately. And this was some point in the afternoon. It's a surprise. Obviously, it's a shock, when someone in your family dies. But unfortunately, he just was not really taking these health problems seriously. I mean, that's just that's just the way it is.
Yeah, I had gotten a DM from Kev today, and he had DM'd me. I'll send you the screenshot if so you can have it. But he DM'd me around 1:30, and he sent me a quick DM on Facebook. Like, he was like, DT, I can't do the show today. Having some chest pains. Gonna go to the hospital, and I'm sorry. His last 2 words were, I'm sorry. And I didn't see the DM until about 3:30. And I responded back, and I'm like, Kev, don't worry about the show. I got this. I said, don't panic. You'll be okay. Just get the care, and I'm sorry. I never heard back. And then, Mish, who is on right now also, we haven't talked in quite some time. And Mish sent me a DM a couple of hours ago saying, I gave John your number. And when Kev got rushed to the hospital about 6 weeks ago, around that time, Kev had given my number to Chicky and to somebody else, in case, he was worried that if he doesn't go home, they're going to get in touch with me, but they never called. They never called. So I said, he obviously came home and they put him on meds, and I was like, you're going to be okay. Just listen to the doctors, do what they say. And he's like, yeah, I am. I'm changed my dietary habits, and, this medicine's kicking my ass, but, I'm really taking this seriously. And when Mish DM'd me today, I wrote right back, and I wrote, is Kev okay? And I got no response. And then I started thinking, oh my God.
Yeah, I didn't respond.
Oh, no. It's okay. It's
walked
okay.
away from my phone.
Yeah.
I mean, it was fresh for me too.
Yeah.
I'd got done talking with John.
Yeah.
Maybe about a handful, maybe about 10 minutes, even earlier.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm still in process mode. I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah.
But you're not wrong when you
and you're not wrong either, because
problems, John.
Because
I would constantly talk to John, to Kevin back and forth, before we did shows and stuff like that. And we would also talk about, his medicine. We'd talk about his eating and stuff. It was when I found out that, it was right around the COVID days when I found out that Kevin had diabetes, and me and him spoke about it pretty intimately, on a lot of levels, about how the worst thing is he has to change his eating habits and stuff.
Yeah.
And just some of the stuff that he wanted to eat was some of it was gross. And I'm just like, I think you can eat better than that. But yeah, I mean, I think when COVID hit, and then he got COVID and everybody was under the scare, me and Kev kind of got really close when it came to talking about, the But yeah, I didn't get back to you right away. It wasn't because of anything.
No, I didn't blame you because I walked away from my phone too. And Big Mike, I haven't called him back. And I talked to Ryder earlier today, and he's like, please call this person. And it just like overwhelmed me. And then, but when you didn't respond, I started getting like, oh no, oh please, God, please, John, don't call me. John, don't call me, because Chicky didn't call and the other guy didn't call. And then I see John's number and it just gutted me. And, I never talked about his diabetes on the shows. If Kev wanted to bring it up, that was his prerogative. But I tell you, man, he was just, and I'm not trying to be dramatic here, but what a good guy. I mean, maybe, he thought that he was invincible. Maybe he thought that, the medication and the complications, were not, I don't want to say weren't worth it, but maybe it's like, all right, I'll just take it slowly and, I'll just gradually get, I don't know. But, you just look at this guy, his love for trying to help stray cats and always looking out for John and for you and for me and, just loving the shows. And I kid you not. I mean, I said this right before we hit record, and I don't want to start throwing names out there because there's a lot of people who, just like, respect and enjoy what you do, we do, Kev does, JD, everybody, Solomon said, everybody keeps themselves on the low, especially those in the business. But my DMs start going off and I see request, and it's people and I'm like, I can't believe how many people he touched. And it was just blowing me away. I mean, I always knew he was a good person, but when I heard his emotion last Monday when he was talking about Chris, who had the cat sanctuary that caught fire and Chris passed away, and like they're saying now 150 cats passed away. As ridiculous as this sounds, like Kev really, really, really thought, I'm going to keep Chris's legacy alive and I'm going to do even more for the cats. And I had even just said to him, like, Kev, when we do the show on Sunday, let's do something where, like half the proceeds or all the proceeds will go towards the cats and this and that. And he's like, yeah, no, that's good. That's good. And he was just such a good fucking guy. Never wanted drama, never fought with anyone. May have been a little bit thick-headed like we all are. But I never in a million years ever thought that it would end like this. It's just really, like John said, I feel like I'm watching a movie right now. I just, this really sucks. It really sucks. And I'm so...
Yeah, and Mish, I think I said this to you, DT, but Mish, I think maybe I said this to you. I was like, I'm eerily calm. Mm-hmm. Like I have a calmness, like, you know what I mean? Like I'm I'm angry, Yeah. But there's like a calmness almost because, this was something in my life that I knew was going to happen. Like, and I just, unfortunately, what happens a lot of times is with people who are like online a lot or perpetually online, they sort of fall into this persona, where this is what people think their life is like. Yeah. And then people who know their life is not like this get very troubled. Yeah. And, and for me, my frustration with my brother, who the last few years, unfortunately, I just was not very close with him because I found him in the last few years, his behavior got more destructive, like towards himself. And, and other people have to pay for that, yeah. That kind of behavior. He was harmless except to himself.
Yeah.
And, me and I have three other brothers. I had four, now I have three. And like two of my other brothers and I were very much like in tune with this, where it was like, okay, he's physically not good at all. He's not really doing what he's supposed to be doing. And there's only one outcome here. So it's like that calmness. Like I spoke to all three of my brothers today, and it's like we all have the same tone. We have the same feeling. It's like, this is fucking bananas and this is awful. But I'm like calm because this is something that I knew was coming. Like, you know, and I didn't think it was coming today. Nobody knows when it's coming, but I knew it was coming. And that was part of my frustration with him as a person, was that, like, you know, like, you really need to take better care of yourself, because, like, you know, this, you don't have a lot of resources that a lot of other people have.
Yeah.
And I Mish, that was like for you too, right? I mean, like, I feel like we've all had these conversations with this guy.
Yeah.
I mean, Kevin Castle and Kevin Scandato were very different people. When I spoke to Kevin Scandato in private, he was very much a fragile individual. And I don't mean fragile in the sense of, like, you know, like he would cry or something like that all the time. That wasn't him at all. But he was in need of help. And Kevin Scandato needed help. And there was only so much help that I could offer him. I tried to go above and beyond in certain ways.
Oh, you certainly did.
And I financially sometimes couldn't, but I did what I could, even just discussing things. But Kevin Castle is strong. Kevin Castle on the show,
Yes.
he was a fucking powerhouse. You would never guess that those two people, if they talked to you, that were the same person. And I'm not saying that he's bipolar or nothing like that.
No, it's so true though.
It's just
so true.
Kevin Castle had built up his years from back in the Minority Report to DTKC to, you know, Kevin Chicky together and Trez and everything else like that. And of course, Soup with me. But he was so knowledgeable on wrestling and baseball, and he was ready to discuss anything ad nauseum sometimes, which was out of absolute love. It was his passion that made Kevin Castle strong. But there was such a dichotomy between the two personalities. There was such a revolving presence, you know, around Kevin Castle, which was beloved, and Kevin Scandato, who, man, I know some of what you've discussed with your trepidations with your brother and stuff, but I saw it too.
Yeah.
You know, in ways. And I just wish, and maybe it's one of these things that people do when you lose somebody close to you, but you always look at it and you're like, I wish I did more with the signs. I wish I stepped up in other ways, even if I wasn't able to. I don't know.
You did more than you could have. I mean, you know, it's interesting you say it that way, because I wonder if that's why, despite what was going on, he did his damnness to be on Monday nights. He did his damnness to be on with Mish. He did his damnness to do 4 and 5 hour shows on Thursdays, even on Patreon, even after the doctors told him, Kev, you need to pull it back. You need to cut it back. And I told Kev, I said, Kev, just do an hour. I said, you've built enough. And now it makes even more sense of what Mish said, because I think the shows and online, that was his true escape. Like when Kevin Castle when he was in Kevin Castle mode, life couldn't be better. Wrestling was going on. Music was going on. He was mingling with people online. He was, talking to Mets, everything. But when Kevin Castle was offline and now it was Kevin Scandato, that's when, the life, real life kicks in. And I think he cared more about Kev Castle than Kev Scandato, as crazy as that may sound. Can I just add one thing? I don't want to say who the wrestler is. 99.9% of you out there can figure out who he is. All right. He was the first person to respond to me earlier. And, his first words to me was there something wrong? Like, was he okay?
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, you didn't,
what the fuck happened, actually?
Yeah. And I was like, wait, you didn't know? And he's like, no, I had no idea. He was talking to Kev almost every day. And Kev kept that offline. I think he just wanted that. He reminds me so much of my fucking mother. Like, he just wanted everybody to think, I'm okay. I'm okay. Don't worry. I got this. I'm okay. And, it wasn't. And
No, it really wasn't. And look, I think it would be really a disservice to people who struggle with health and mental issues and financial issues to completely gloss over this as part of something that really impacted his overall health, his mental health. Kevin Castle had a lot to say online, but Kevin Scandaro, you would not want to trade lives with that person anytime soon. His life was it was a very self-imposed exile life that he built up over time, primarily because he just could not get his shit together to be, I think, honestly, and this, and I think it's important to talk about these things because I think everybody has some people like this in their life, and they're either avoiding them because it's hard, or they, and they really want to help, or they're at their wits' ends and they don't know how to help people. Kevin's life was very, very troubling. Like it was profoundly troubling.
Which was amazing considering how many people Kevin Scandado actually helped. I mean, besides the wrestling.
Oh, bands. Yeah, we haven't got we can't even get into the bands.
That's what I was saying. In the music world, it's insane.
We'll be here all day.
Responsibility he had. Like he would talk about it on the shows, even about dealing with these bands and dealing with some of the divas of other bands and just how he handled all this stuff. And this was like pre-show stuff when he was just talking off the cuff. But it's amazing how many people that Kevin Scandado actually did help.
Yeah, and he was on the road to being like a player, and his craziness, like all of our craziness, fucks up shit. Like he self-sabotages himself, and like he, unfortunately, he couldn't be Kevin Cass.
Yeah.
Like, that's really what it comes down to. And, for people that know that this person has this whole other like persona, and then unfortunately with that persona, I'm just going to be frank here because it doesn't serve anybody a purpose not to be, comes a lot of lies and exaggeration about a life he did not have.
Yeah.
Because he needed to fuel that Kevin Castle and all this stuff. And like, and it was disruptive. Yeah. Like, I can't tell you how people in a family with a person like that who know this person is not well is acting like they have this charmed life, online. And it's very, very, very misleading. And, for me, my relationship with him got very sour the last couple of years because I saw that internet personality, like he was going to that well too many times. And like, I would see him create these long form conversations about nothing. And I'm like, oh, he's probably just bored and he wants someone to talk to. And it's very sad, because you're in a family with this person and you have a wife and children and pets and cars and houses and vacations. And, this person is really struggling to just get through the day because of all of these problems they have. And the people that know they have them, he has burned many of these bridges because you could not talk to him about getting better. Like you just couldn't do it. He would not talk to you.
Yeah.
Like, he just would not. Like if you really said, hey, listen, I'm not going to I'm going to, I'll help you out with this thing, but I'm telling you right now, if you're still like, doing this or that, I'm not going to help you. Like he would be beside himself. And unfortunately, people in my family, I don't know what you would call it. It's just probably mental illness, get very violent and throw like tantrums if you like try to break with them from reality. And like, it's a staple. Like he was like one of a handful of people in my family who behave this way. And like most people just kid glove these people, but
that's because they love him.
He just,
they love
him, but
love.
Also it's easier.
Yeah.
It's easier.
You're right. Yes.
It's easier, so like, like I was one of the only people who would tell him, it's like, listen, get the fuck off the internet, take better care of yourself and stop making up these stories or whatever. Yeah. And then he would just be like, you're just ungrateful. And so, and he was very like, there was a deep pettiness to him because he had to protect this brand at all costs. And it was very disturbing. The last couple of years in particular were deeply troubling.
See, with me, it's a little bizarre because it's reversed. I revealed something to you earlier. And what I'm about to say, Mish doesn't even have to say a word, but I know deep down inside he's going to say, I know exactly what you're talking about. And I know a lot of you longtime supporters of what we do will figure this out too. Because I used to say it ad nauseum and it would piss off people that would tune into the shows. See, with Kev and I, it's almost the reverse. And what I mean by that is when Kev and I started having issues, I always took control and I always felt I needed to be in control because that's how things got done. And what I noticed, and I used to say this on the shows all the time, and people know exactly what I'm talking about when I get it. I used to throw these subliminal comments on the shows that, I can't stand these people that they go online and they make themselves look like superheroes and they create this persona about themselves. And then in real life, it's the complete opposite. And I remember doing a live stream on Twitter from my parents' house on the beach. And somehow we got into that really raw conversation. I'm like, even people I know, they create these personas online and then they build a fake life about themselves. And then they got to maintain it. And how do you maintain that when you make stories about this and make stories about that? And that was part of the fallout because I was frustrated because it seemed like, all right, we're in two different worlds and they're just not syncing and something is not right. But when we started talking again the last 2-3 years, it was the opposite, that I was talking to a much different Kev Castle. Like I felt like I was talking to Kev Scandato the last 2-3 years. And I think what was happening was like he was opening up to me, but like opening up to me as if everything was okay and that because we even talked about it on our 1-year anniversary show back in the end of January. He had said that, he did the show with Chicky and he learned how to do this and learn how to host the show and record this and do that. And his equipment sounded amazing. And it sounded like, okay, he's taken charge and he's finally, that persona is not what it used to be. And now he's really taken a hands-on approach. And I honestly think, and I'm not trying to say this to sound conceited or anything, I just think we both really missed that friendship that we built for almost 20 years. I miss doing the shows with him. I missed laughing with him. I said this earlier on Discord. I know the guy almost half my life. We started talking in 1999 when he was calling my wrestling hotline. That was 26 years ago. I'm 56 years old. So it was almost half my life I know this guy. But I can honestly say, and I've said this on the shows recently, repeatedly, and now it's maybe kind of like, DT, you should have had your eyes open a little bit more. I truly felt that we were closer the last 2 years, especially the last year, than I think we were ever. Because our mingling was the shows and that was it. The shows and that was it. Like we had more real conversations the last year and a half than I think we did in the whole 20 years. That's why everybody used to always say, when are you guys going to meet up? When are you guys going to meet up? We never had that closeness. But I know he had that closeness with Mish, because he always, Mish, I'm not saying this to kiss up or be extra nice. I told JD earlier, I don't mean to single him out, but I told a few people tonight and I told a few people, DM, I said, he truly, truly cherished you, just loved the conversations, always, appreciated all of your thoughts and concerns. I think at the end of the day, I think Kev Castle got his most pleasure helping others, seeing other people happy, making sure the cats are fed, making sure everybody that tuned into the shows got enjoyment, got an escape. Just he cared about everybody else and put himself last. And I think once that started catching up to him, it's like you go to what makes you happiest, And,
what was one of the things I was thinking while you're talking about the old days, 26 years ago. And I was thinking, I'm like, man, those Minority Report days kind of sucked. And I don't mean the shows themselves sucked, but that was when Kevin Castle was calling you on a rotary phone.
Yes.
And I remember the process of just trying to teach this guy Skype and then getting him a headset. And then all of a sudden people were I remember, I mean, it was probably half-hearted joking, but I remember people were upset. They're like, Kevin Castle doesn't sound the same anymore. Now that he's not on a rotary phone, now that he's using Skype and he's got a headset, I don't know if I like the way this Kevin Castle sounds.
You remember you did the YouTube tutorial.
Yeah,
I didn't watch it at
everything
first.
I could to bring this guy into the 19th century. I was like, come on, Kev. Come on with me. He's like, what does this button do?
Mish, I bought him a headset like a year and a half ago. He's like, my headset broke. And he's like, and I'm like, Kev, show me on Amazon, what you use. And he sent me like the link to this headset that was like $30. I'm like, Kev, you get something nice. I got him something a little bit nicer, but he was like, oh, this is amazing. This is this. I think he just really just cared about everybody else. That was what made him happiest. I mean, it's incredibly frustrating to John, and I can only imagine his brothers and, his mom as well. But based on what I have heard, talking to John, I think, his mom was kept out of the loop more because they didn't want her to, to be worried and sick for him. But it must be incredibly frustrating to have a brother, love that brother, want to do everything you can, but he's 56 years old, about to be 57. And it gets to a point where, hey, he's a grown adult. He's got to take care of this. And maybe this will scare him straight. Sometimes you got to hit rock bottom to get yourself back up. I just personally think he never in a million years ever thought it was this urgent. I think when he had the incident 6 weeks ago, I think he thought, oh, okay, I got a cut, I got a Band-Aid on it, in the form of medication. I'll just take the medication, and I'm not perfect, but as long as I get the medication and I slowly get into this mode, things will be okay. And I think it was a much, much more serious issue that, no, you can't even waste a day. And if anybody could take anything from this, other than the fact that we truly love this guy. I mean, honestly, we truly love this man. And, if you take anything from here, other than the absolute love that he just showed everybody out there, no matter who you were, but also learn. And I think that's what John's trying to bring across too. Learn from this. I swear on my family, when Kev told me what happened and I went to my urologist and my urologist says your red blood cell count is above 50. And I'm like, all right, what do I have to do? And what's the problem? And they're like, no, you're an elevated risk of a stroke, of a heart attack. You got to get that red blood cell count down. And they're talking about medication, talking about sleep apnea. They're talking about donating blood. And I swear, I told Kev, I said, Kev, I thought about you immediately. I said, I gotta do, because I thought Kev took care of things. So like, he's the same age as me almost. He just had a scare. I can't have that happen to me. I donated whole blood. 3 weeks later, I get my blood test done and my red blood cells are 49. Just a drop under 50, but back to normal. And I was like, okay, I got it in check. Now I got to keep it that way. So I got to change that. Yeah.
One thing that Kevin did that, and I think a lot of people know this too, but maybe they don't. I mean, the obvious is there, but John Draper, you were introduced to us because of Kevin Castle. And I will be forever thankful to Kevin Castle for knowing you, for knowing your friendship, for having you on the show, for having you as a part of us, as a part of Soup. Like, I can't, I could never thank him enough for that. And even though sometimes brothers will be brothers and you guys fight a little bit, I always knew that, there was love there.
Yeah.
And I always appreciated Kevin Castle for introducing me to you. And to Trez. Every time that we ever talked about Trez, it was always love. It was always, she is my friend.
It's funny, not to interrupt you, but when Trez first came around, I admit it, I got jealous. I'm like, wait, who's this girl that's like, now she's part of the DTKC family. Wait a minute, it's just the two of us and this and that. And he's like, no, you don't understand. She's like, she's really, really, she's into wrestling. She's awesome, this and that. I realized very quickly, she's a doll. And he absolutely adored doing the shows with her. I mean, honestly, he just, and I'm not just saying that to her, he absolutely loved it. And John, I told you this earlier, and I'm not saying this because he was your brother and he just passed away, and my condolences to you and your family. But he truly, truly knew that you cared, and he truly knew that you looked out for him, because even when I would talk to him, like, I never really knew about these riffs in this, but even when I would talk to him and he was like, yeah, I did not a while back, I did an episode. He actually told me one time, he's like, DT, do you have any problem if I do a recap of something with Mish and Drapes and John? And I'm like, no, like, why would I be upset? He actually was concerned that maybe I'd have a problem. He just always looked out for everybody else. It just really sucks, man, because, even though he had those problems, like, that's someone that should live to be 80, 90. You know what I mean? That's someone who was doing good for others, but it is also a wake-up call that, I even joked on Patreon. I told everybody, I'm like, look, guys, and anybody that's on Patreon knows I ain't exaggerating this. I said this about a month and a half ago when that happened to Kev. I'm like, look, this is why we don't do YouTube shows every 3 days. This is why I don't do this. This is why, because you got to have a balance. You have to listen to your body. And if the doctors are telling you you're doing too much, you need to sleep, you need to cut this back, you need to do this, you got to listen to the doctors. And here's, if anybody out there that loved Kev and appreciated Kev, if this is a PSA announcement, this is Kev looking down right now and telling all of you, listen to your doctors, if something is wrong, get it taken care of. And I do want to say one thing very quickly, because I want to apologize for some people on Twitter, and I want to just let everybody know the reason why I kept it vague, and I even said that everything, you'll understand it later, because number one, at that time, some people in Kev's family still did not know, and it was not my place to go up there, put up a rest in peace and this and that. We're going to, this is not even a tribute show. I mean, I'm sure down the line, a bunch of people in wrestling, podcasts, whatever, will all have a fun night talking. We'll relive stories with Kev. This only happened a few hours ago, but that's why I posted it the way it did on Twitter, because people still didn't know. And the reason why we waited until Raw ended is not because we wanted to see Raw or what transpired. It's because there's a lot of people who do not go on social media, who do not spend their time online, that are expecting just a regular show. And we felt, okay, we'll do it after Raw, because there's going to be a lot of people that don't even know what was posted on social media, have no idea what was happening. And I see right now, Cruiserweight just posted a link. Ghost Cult Magazine is paying tribute to Kev right now. Legendary New York metal and hardcore booker Kevin Scandato has died.
Who is this?
This is Ghost Cult Magazine.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah. Listen, it was important when I was talking to DT and Mish earlier today, and I was like, the thing that my brother identified with the most was what we're doing right now
Yes.
and the people I'm talking to right now.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, Kevin, that's how he saw himself. Kevin is very far removed from the music world, and all the stuff that he did is in, you know, that was significant was a very long time ago. And he did do some pretty significant things, but they were, you know, in the 90s and early 2000s, and this is 2025. But he really identified with being like a wrestling podcaster.
Yeah.
And that's how he saw himself. So you know, to me, it was a no-brainer. That's what he would have wanted to do. He would have, you know, this was the show he was supposed to be doing right now as we speak. This motherfucker never missed Raw. I'm with Kevin at WCW Nitro, right? With all like 15 people, like, and he's like, you know, stressing about missing Raw, and then he shows me a guy in Nassau Coliseum who has a giant sign that says "I'm taping Raw." And comes like, see that? See that? Like, you know, like he was very like connected to like this,
Yeah.
you know, like he really was, right? And you know, this was like his whole identity was really this. And you know what? That's great when you get to shut that off and you interact with real people and have real experiences and relationships with people.
Yeah.
You know, unfortunately, this persona took over any sort of normalcy in his life, and it was very distressing. So, you know, as a cautionary tale, as someone that, you know, now has to bury this person at a family expense because he just didn't have himself together to handle that. I just want you to know that if you are somebody like this, where you're perpetually online and you have a really cool handle and you like to make jokes and all this other shit, that's cool. You know, if your real life isn't a flaming fucking dumpster fire and you're ignoring your health, you're ignoring your mental health, you're ignoring your family, you're ignoring your friends, you're not leaving the house, you're not getting fucking sunlight, you're eating all your meals from the bodega, you know, this is not good. This is not good. It's not good, especially as an older person. And, you know, this was like my nightmare scenario that I knew was coming.
Yeah.
Like if you knew the frequency that and Mitch knows this for a fucking fact, but if you knew the frequency that I had these conversations with my other siblings who are not like this, who, you know, have their shit together, who don't understand why this person is so caught up in all of this, you know, it's a cautionary tale. You know, my brother's life was very sad. It was a very sad end to a very sad, lonely life. And if you have people like this that you know are like this, and you have some agency over them, and you have some modicum of influence over these people, you need to use that influence to help them help themselves. Because the outcome is this. You know, this was not a heroic end to somebody who has all these people.
He wasn't quiet about it, though, John. That's he did talk about it with us. He did talk about it with me. He did tell me about his problems. It's a weird thing because I understand exactly what you're saying, because obviously intimately I understand exactly what you're saying.
Oh, yeah.
But it wasn't like Kev was like, I'm not telling anybody anything. Like even the people close to me don't know who I am. He did. He did try. I don't know where the breakdown came in as far as follow-up. Do you know what I mean? Because on pen and paper or digital Discord messages, he did tell me that he was hurting. He did tell me that he was ill. He did tell me about all of these things. And I'm not a doctor. You know what I mean? And it's a bad way to describe it, but it's like, Kev, you know, what does the doctor say? You know, Kev, did you go to the doctor? Did you go to the hospital? Did you go to urgent care? Like there was only so much I could do, but he never, at least with me, maybe my relationship was different with him, but at least with me, I never felt shut out in that aspect. I don't know. What do you do? What do you do when you live, you know, 500 miles away? What do you do?
It's tricky. Yeah.
Can I be a little raw for a minute and say something? Maybe I shouldn't, but maybe it's needed. Could it be that Kev just looked at his whole family and saw marriage, kids, pets, performing, and maybe he kind of felt embarrassed that, okay, outside of Kevin Castle, I'm this lonely, diabetic, person that, doesn't go out and doesn't do this and doesn't do that. And maybe he just didn't want his family to see that side of him and was just very, like he looked at everybody else and then looked at himself and said, how can I reveal this to my family? They're going to all look at me as a disappointment or, look at this. So instead he went to what gave him the most comfort. And that is, talking to Mish, talking to people online, having the 5-hour Patreon shows. That was his therapy. That was his therapy. It almost feels to me that he might have been a little bit embarrassed to, reveal that side of him.
Honestly, I don't think that's what it was. I think the persona, the persona of that, if you're going to make up a persona about yourself, you're going to make it better than your real life, right? I mean, what's the point, right? But the problem is, as the persona got better, the real life went different. What I mean? It was the problem is, as the persona was so good for him that any deviation from it was so crushingly disappointing. And it wasn't Kevin ostracized himself from people because he was just very lazy. And he just didn't the thought of him taking the train to go see somebody. That sounds like a nightmare. And it's like, motherfucker, people do this all the time. You live in the city your whole life. He just even getting on a subway. This is a guy who lived in New York City for almost 60 years. He didn't like getting on the subway. What the fuck is that? That doesn't it's at direct odds with really living in the city. It's just, it's very strange. And it just got very alarming. I want to say the last couple of years because his health dissipated. But really, this was an ongoing struggle for him. And unfortunately, we grew up at a time and in an environment where if you are unhappy as a kid, too fucking bad. And he was a very difficult teenager. Kevin would hide in closets to avoid going to high school. He literally would hide in an attic closet, to not go to high school. And it was just what the fuck is that? Why don't you want to go to high school?
Can I ask you guys a question?
Mm-hmm.
Something that I've been wanting to ask for 5 or 6 years or 5 years, whatever it is.
Yes, technically we all have a lot of hair. We just shave our heads bald.
Let me ask you this. 5 years in the making, question I always wanted to ask. Do you think that's why he didn't go to Lucky 13 when we had that get together?
I know why he didn't go to Lucky 13, because just like he didn't go to other things, is because he didn't want to be judged physically by people who didn't know on the internet that he wasn't this very short, obese guy.
Oh, geez.
You know what I'm saying?
I was the fattest I'd ever been at.
Yeah,
that
I was.
show.
It was.
That's what I'm saying.
Heavy too.
But this was the other thing too. And I remember other people being like, "So let me get this straight. Your brother doesn't want wrestling fans to make fun of his appearance. Does he know who wrestling fans are? Wrestling fans are not the most buff people we're not the coolest guys in the room. I don't know what the fuck." But he has convinced himself that this would somehow be a thing. And this is a true story. So my brother, Mark, played Tompkins Square Park with a whole bunch of bands, thousands of people at this thing. I take the train in from upstate. It's a Sunday. And I take a train 170 miles to go to this fucking park show that my brother's playing. And my other brothers are there. So now there's 4 of us in the same place for the first time in since whatever. And a bunch of people were there from bands, wanted to take pictures with the 4 of us. And one of these pictures I put up, and Kevin fucking sends me the craziest fucking message. You have to take that picture down, because if people who don't like me see that online, they're going to use it to fuck with me online. And I'm like, who thinks this? in a way, it's egotistical, right? It's like, I'm so important that this photograph of me might get people to, but that's the way his mind was working.
He was
like,
very
you know,
serious about image. I remember, I mean, gosh, going back to the DTKC days, I remember when I had Miss Destiny doing an intro with 9 Inch Nails Closer. And I had Don Tony and Kevin Castle involved in the bit. This is back when I used to do like little audio productions for the show. And I remember he's like, that's the worst fucking thing I've ever heard. I don't ever want to fucking hear it again. And at first I thought he was kidding. Like, what, Kev? It's just a joke, man.
No.
Like, dude, I don't want to fucking hear it anymore.
Yeah.
And it's not a shot on Kev, but you're right. He didn't want to be put in a precarious position where his image looks like he was supposed to be mocked.
He didn't want
people who didn't like him to have that as a reason to make fun of him online. Now, this is probably a normal thing if you're in junior high, maybe high school, maybe. But at 50 years old, like worrying about people making fun of you on the internet, you're 50 something, you're like, why would you even care? Like, you know, and unfortunately, you know, it was a combination of the fact that he never went anywhere publicly anyway, but also he was very leery of, like, you know, he wanted people to think he was like some tough guy or something like that. And then he's like 5'5", you know, and it's like, you know, and he's really like in bad shape. So like, you know, but it's like, like nobody, like, did he think he was like a model? Like, I still don't understand. Like, it's just the strangest thing. Like, it's very odd. I don't, like, we've always been performers. So like for me and my other brothers, it's like, well, yeah, of course someone's going to make fun of you. You're on stage. You know, that's, you know, it just comes with the territory. You know, that was a really, and I remember telling all you guys, I told Mish and Joey till I was blue in the face, like, you're not going to see them, you know, like, you're not going to see him. Oh. And then I think it might've been you, Mish, or whatever. You were like, well, I'm coming all the way from Chicago. There's no way, like, he's not going to fucking show up for me or whatever. Like, you know, and I'm like, he's not going to show up.
But he's the one that set up the club. Like when I talked to him, so it was the Soup 10-year anniversary, and me and Joe wanted to do something special, and I'd never been up to New York at that time. So my whole thing was like, okay, let's go out, spend all the money we can. We got ourselves a big mansion for everybody to fucking hang out in and watch WrestleMania. We went to House of Glory and hung out with JD.
Yeah, with JD and Jason.
And fucking, you know, and obviously Gareth just put his picture in there when he saw us at the House of Glory show. Mm-hmm. The big finale was at his club. And it was like, you know, that was it. And like everybody's like, oh, are you guys going to be at the club? It was like the first time I met Krauser and all these other people and shit. Mm-hmm. And it was fantastic to get up there. And you know, it's the one thing that I really, and every single time I see that Dell's video, every time I look back on that, all I keep thinking is, Jesus Christ, why isn't Kev here with us?
I know. And that, you know, and that was the thing too. Like he should. And I remember telling him around the time, I go, you need to get your shit together to show up. Like, you have to do this. Like, you need to do this. And like, even my other brothers were like, how, like, isn't that like, why would he do that? And it's just, but also this was kind of like Kevin though. Like, this is, you know, he doesn't show up to weddings, you know, or like, you know, and it's like, you know, it's like, why would he do this? And it's,
but he's surrounded. That's the thing I didn't understand. Johnny's surrounded by people he loved. Nobody was going to.
Oh yeah.
Can you imagine what kind of a fucking ass whooping?
But also like the ego, but the hubris of someone might make fun of me for being overweight. That's like you're already thinking like it's about you, like, you know, like, you know, like in that regard. It was, can you imagine, Mish, that like, or like with the C2E2, if somebody, you know, came over and he's like, well, I liked you, but then I saw how tall you were. Now I don't care. Yeah. Like, it's just so silly. Like, it's just like, dude, you're already there
surrounded by people. Dude, see, that's what I don't understand. I feel stronger when I'm surrounded by people I know that have my back. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, of course, we all have little idiosyncrasies about ourselves, you know, whether it's your weight or whether it's the way you look. Maybe you got a bald head or a lazy eye. It don't fucking matter. But if you're surrounded by the boys, right?
It doesn't matter.
By the boys.
Don't
you feel stronger? knowing that if there is some asshole out there that's going to try and confront you, that you literally are surrounded by people who fucking love you instead.
Yeah.
Maybe that's how
it was sad that he denied himself that like the price was too heavy to pay. Like it was like, well, what if somebody takes a picture of me and then makes fun? It's like, dude, like what? Like who cares? Like why do you care? And that was the other thing too.
Good memories too. Look, and
it was amazing.
Like it's just bad stuff, dude. Kevin Castle has made me die laughing. Just some of his club stories about John the Doorman alone are fucking like infamous. When he was talking about that stuff on Soup, I fucking
John the Doorman. Yeah,
Kevin is a fantastic storyteller.
Yeah,
he is a fantastic storyteller.
We get that from our dad. That's the thing we got from our father. For sure.
Oh my God. Yeah, you got it too. There's just something about the way that
it's from our dad.
And it's partially charisma, but it's also the way that you guys describe things, right? Like,
you're
not over dramatic, right? Like when I read something, I'm fucking over dramatic. But when you guys talk, you immediately bring me there into that position. Like you can describe the environment just based on the people that you talk about. Like I knew about Lucky 13 way before I ever was in Lucky 13. You know what I mean? Like when he was describing the Go-Go Girls dancing.
Oh yeah, it was as advertised. It was totally as advertised. Yeah.
Can I say
you guys are both good at that? But yeah, maybe that is from your dad. But Kevin, I mean, as far as if you really want a good story, any of Kevin's stories were good stories because he could take you there. He could bring you into that fucking moment.
Can I say also, I'm incredibly sad that he didn't go. I always held it against him.
I know.
I always held it against him.
You told me that night outside.
You know why I'm incredibly sad right now? Because, and I am being serious, I could only imagine every time that that night is brought up, every time somebody posted a video, every time somebody discussed it, he had to eat up inside the fact that I could have been there and I didn't go. Like he always said he worked, and then he said that he met like an old flame, WrestleMania weekend and this and that. And, I always wrote it off like, hey, maybe he was working that time. But now I'm incredibly sad because all those years talking about it, every time he heard it, it's a reminder to himself, I should have been there. I could have been there. I didn't go. Kev, if you could hear this right now, I swear to God, I'm not saying this because you passed away. There was nothing wrong with you. Physically,
there was no reason.
There was no reason to do that.
No reason.
No reason at all. Nobody's perfect. And you know what? I think if he would have showed up even once or twice, maybe it would have helped him break out of that shell, get rid of that stigma. Like, hey, everybody's treating me just like everyone else. Listen, I'm not pandering to Mish, but when we went to the big event and we hung out with a whole bunch of people, not one person was like, oh my God, look at Mish. Look how tall he is. Oh my God, look how big he is. DT, look how fat you are. Nobody cared.
Like, it was all in his head. Yeah, it was all in his head.
There was nothing.
Like it really was.
Yeah, I mean, even like, I remember that artist, Art Mooney, I think his name is, and he took a picture with Mish and I, and he DM'd me after, and he's like, so cool meeting both of you. And that's the whole vibe. I remember Naya was there and a bunch of others. Everybody just hung out, had a great time. Nobody looked at anybody weird. And I wish I wish I would have been told a different reason, like he wasn't there. But, looking back on it, he was such an incredibly good person. I agree with what you're saying. I guess he didn't want Kevin Castle to look with people to look with at imperfections. Like Kev Castle was Kev Castle. And if they saw what Kev Castle really is, well, that puts a different kind of light on what Kev Castle was always, meant to be. And, that must be such a stress and a burden to carry on. That's why I swear to you, listen, I said this earlier and I meant it. This reminds me so much of my grandmother. In 1991, all right, I was 22 years old. And my grandmother I was closer to than anybody at that time. She was the one that introduced me to wrestling. And as I got into my early 20s, that's when I was going out, and spending time with my grandmother wasn't the priority anymore. And every so often, I would talk to her on the phone. When are we going to Atlantic City? When are we going to Atlantic City? Nanny, I promise you, we'll go soon. We'll definitely go soon. One day I'm working at Chase Bank and my phone rings in the afternoon, and it's my father hysterically crying, and he says that your grandmother passed away. And at first I didn't know if he was talking about his mom or my mom's mom, and my mom's mom was the one. So he told me, and I raced home, and she died, if I remember correctly, it was a Thursday, and I was talking to my friends Friday. They found out what happened, and I talked to my friend Paul. And I said to Paul, I said, what are you doing this weekend? He says, I'm going to Atlantic City tonight. And it was just like bizarre because none of my friends ever talked about Atlantic City. And I was like, can I come? And he's like, don't you have the funeral tomorrow? I'm like, yeah, but can I come? And he's like, yeah, you could come. You know, so he thought I was just trying to get my mind off of it. But I felt like until my grandmother is buried under the ground, like I have to take something from Atlantic City, bring it home, put it in that fucking casket, and say to her, Nanny, we went to Atlantic City. And that's exactly what I did. We drove to Jersey, stood until 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. I brought home a poker chip. I went to my grandmother's funeral. I put the poker chip in her hand, and I said, Nanny, we went to Atlantic City. And I lost it. And I told you earlier, I said, one thing for years and years and years, all I kept, and Kev as well, and now it puts it in even more perspective. When are you two going to get together? When are you two going to meet? When are you two going to meet? We were making arrangements to meet Cross later on this year when he comes to New York for the book signing. And I talked to Kev, and we're like, yeah, we're going to do this. And I'm like, yeah, we're definitely going to do this. And we're going to, even if, it's just, we meet him privately and we don't like have other people. And we were all set on doing it. And I told you, I said, whatever service you do for your brother, I have to be there, even for 5 minutes, because I cannot have him go to his grave and we never met. It reminds me so much of my grandmother. I will make it my business to be there and to pay my respects. But I tell you, man, I understand what John is saying, that everybody, had that feeling. And trust me, you knew a million times more than anything that I knew. But I really thought that he was on the mend. I really thought that this scared him straight, and it was like, all right, if I'm not going to do it for myself, I'm going to do it for the cats. I'm going to do it for Amy. I'm going to do it for everybody else. But I really, never in a million years would I have ever thought that this day would have come so quickly. I really thought, the medication would have bought him time to like straighten himself out. And, that's something else. He lived, unless I believe otherwise, he lived straight edge. He didn't smoke. He didn't drink.
Yeah.
As far as I know. And I don't.
No, you're correct.
So
he actually constantly used to rag me about smoking in private, believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah. He would hear it on the show. Like, so most of the time I edit out the clicks of my lighter. I try to. And I smoke on the shows, and it's just a thing I've cut back on, but I haven't completely omitted. And then actually the only times I really smoke these days are when I'm doing shows, and tonight. But yeah, no, he would bring it up every once in a while. He's like, "You still smoking?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, Kev, unfortunately I am." And
he never smoked or drank, Mish. Like he never.
I know, but I always found it was one of his endearing qualities that he even cared enough to say something like, "Why are you still smoking?" Like you've done that to me back in the day, and your way, and Joey does it. Joey does it regularly enough that I should just fucking stop, and I come close to stop. But I always found it endearing that he made time to care about my ailments too.
Yeah, his things were, I think he psychologically was not kind of in tune with reality, with a lot of things that were wrong with him. But, my father was also kind of like that. Like when he got sick, like I was actually with my father at Sloan Kettering when he was told that he can't like have an operation and everything like that. And my father was very much like, well, I know this is going to kill me, but I really think I'm going to beat this. And like, he was telling me all this stuff and telling me all this stuff, and then I would find out that he was secretly still smoking. Like, you know what I mean? And I was like, oh, this motherfucker. Like, and then I remember even bringing it up in hospice, like when he was unrecognizable. And then I think somebody else brought up, was like, oh, he was still smoking. And I'm like, he was? And I think my wife was like, who was smoking at the time. I wasn't a smoker at that point, but was like, how did you not know he was still smoking? And I'm like, I don't, because he fucking told me. Like, like he was, it's just, I think, when it comes to your health, especially serious things, our inclination generally is to run away, and pretend like, la, 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 I don't hear it. But the problem was, especially in his case, there was a lot of different things happening at the same time. And like treating one thing made sense, but there was other things too. He just had a lot of very bad habits and like bad sleeping habits. And like, when you don't have a lot of places to go, you're not on a regular schedule.
Yeah.
And, he would sleep, he's up all night on the internet, like all fucking night.
Yeah.
Then sleep till noon, turn in about 5 or 6 in the morning, then sleep till noon. And, he just had a lot of very bad habits. And people around him, were getting sick or moving on with life and changing. And he was kind of stuck in the same place. And he was very much frozen in carbonite, Han Solo. Like he just, if you noticed, and I don't know if other people ever picked up on this, but they might have. But Kevin's references hit like an arc in the time of like the 19th century, and then they stop. Like his movie references, his TV references, they all peak around mid 90s to the 2000s, to like, because that's like the end of him socializing. It kind of ended at that point. So his references were very dated because he didn't know what was really going on like in the 21st century.
Right.
It was very frustrating. It's the difficulty now is, having to kind of face, other people in our family who, tried to help him. I had a cousin who Kevin leaned on pretty heavily. My oldest brother, Kevin, leaned on pretty heavily. My mother, who's 83, these people were kind of managing his life, and things like that. They were like helping him out all the time. He always needed help. Like he constantly needed help. And it's just very, like, it was very alarming to know we were going to get to this point, but now that we're here and it's there's a lot of people very, very upset who cared about him through the podcast, who knew him, for a long time from DTKC, from doing stuff on Soup. Not even talk about the music people. I just feel like I just want to stress to people, if you are one of these people who has a lot of hard times communicating in the real world and you're locked into this internet life, talk to somebody, like, please, or take advice people might be giving you about, being so disconnected. Take it seriously, because my brother did not take it seriously. Like, he just didn't take any of this seriously. I would be very hard pressed to say he probably was not taking any medication. I don't care what he told me.
It reminds me of Mickey Mantle. When Mickey Mantle,
like he was taking nothing.
Yeah, it reminded me of Mickey Mantle. When Mickey Mantle, he had the warning signs and he ignored it. And then it was too late. And I remember when he got really sick and he's like telling everyone, like, you want a role model? This is not a role model. Don't do what I did. And I think for Kev, if everyone out there truly appreciated Kev, or if you want to learn something from this, if you know anybody with those warning signs, or you yourself, because I think this also, and I say this in nothing but love for Kev, it's very tempting and somewhat addicting to have that kind of reception online as, you know, the persona that you build. And then that brings you nothing but joy, because you listen, 2 weeks ago on a Monday night, we opened up the show and I'm like, Kev, how you feeling? He's like, you know, I tell you, you know, taking my blood pressure 3 times a day, I realize now that my work for the job, for the music, is what gives me all my stress. And you know, the shows is what, you know, he really looks forward to and brings him happiness and this and that. And it's very tempting to just put a crutch or rely on just the things that, you know, give you that comfort. But you also have to take the reality pill that, hey, you know, unfortunately, at the end of the day, you're the person that's you're looking in the mirror with, not the online profile that you created. And I think that's what did him in. And I tell you, man, it breaks my fucking heart that he couldn't figure it out. Couldn't figure it out, because I truly think, you know, if he would have just made some slight adjustments, I think he'd still be here.
Yeah. And you know, I have to say, for people, like, to be very clear about this, DT and Mish, you know, as far as what Kevin, you know, identified with and how this was so important to him, you know, it's a result of you two being extremely generous with him, being extremely patient with him. Mish, on many occasions, like, whenever, like, I just even would make the flippant comment about, like, oh, you didn't talk to Mish about this or whatever, like, going back to this movie, he'd be like, Mish is like one of my closest friends. You're talking to me like I don't even know him. Like, he was very, like, defensive. You could see him doing that, right? Like, like, you know, he was very, and like, he was just very defensive. Like, you know, regardless of how much you both probably wanted to drown him, you know, in a sea of deep fried oil sometimes, because he would get on your nerves. You know, he leaned on both of you in the same way, in a very big way, because, you know, he built this persona off of the strength of you two building these programs. You know what I mean? And, you know, he couldn't have done it without either one of you. Like, none of this would have happened for him, you know, as far as that goes, you know. And he really loves you both very much. Like, it was very much like it was like this very frustrating thing sometimes, you know, you both had falling out with him at, you know, at certain points and this and that. But, like, you know, I think, you know, in particular, you know, when it comes to, like, this being the most important thing to him, which is why I wanted to talk about it here, you know, it's a result of the two of you sort of allowing this to happen, you know, for him. You know what I mean? That's the way I've always thought. That's why my family's always interpreted it too. You know, is that, you know, Kevin thinks he's like he's like this, like, you know, like this can't miss talent, you know, or something like that. But there's all this work that you guys are doing, you know, that he can't do or that he won't do. You know what I'm saying? To get to that place, you know, and you know, it was just. I know you know this, but it's like I want to say it out loud. Like, you know what I mean?
Thank you.
I really appreciate
the magic of Kev's stories, though. You know, I mean, when we're talking about, you know, him coming up as a podcaster and stuff, but for Soup and for me and even over the years with TTKC too, but the magic of stories when he would talk about wrestling always had you in them, John. Always had you in. Hey, we went to MSG. We went to this show. Hey, we saw this guy. Every single time he told a story, he told it proudly of him and his brother. You know, he would talk about how your folks weren't really into the wrestling at some points, you know, like you were always a part of every story.
Yeah.
To not know who John Draper was means that you never listened to a Kevin Castle story. You never listened to him talking about growing up. Because more than anybody else, he would constantly talk about how you and him would go to all these wrestling shows, all these moments in his life that reverberated into his 50s, all these important matches that he saw. He saw them with his little brother. He saw them with you. And that was beyond endearing to hear. It was, that was the connection. That was the stories that I would always remember that Kev would talk about were the ones that always had you in them.
I joked last week with him on the show on Monday night. I said, Kev, just think 20 years from now, we'll be in our 70s doing this. And we were having a good chuckle out of it. And he was a good co-host, man. There's always that saying that you could lead a horse to water, but you can't force them to drink. I mean, I truthfully think that Mish, John, your family, even some of his friends out there, did everything they could for him. But at the end of the day, he was the one that had to sign off on it. And for some reason, he didn't. You don't know if he just gave up and he's like, look, I'm in such bad shape, nothing I'm going to do. And I'm not trying to listen. I'm not trying to get really, really raw. I always felt also, and I told my wife this earlier too. I said, I think when your dad passed away, I think that devastated him. And I think that was, and it might have even been something like, look, he thought he was going to beat it and it still took him out. And I almost feel, because trust me, I have a relative who I love very dearly. And I don't mind saying it. It's my mother. 5 years ago, my mother was going in for heart surgery that she told us it was no big deal. It was just a minor thing. And we find out that, you better get to the hospital. She may not make it. And she was pronounced dead twice. And what we found pretty much was not only did she not tell me, my father, or my brother the severity of her heart issues, but it led to a point that it was more of like a revelation. If anybody ever goes on and looks at the pictures of me kissing my mom the day before that surgery, just thinking like, oh, it's no big deal, she'll be home tomorrow. You look at her, she's very heavy. Her face looks brown. And there's nothing wrong with having brown skin, but my mom is white as can be, and you look at her face and it's overly bloated. And my mom had to seek treatment because she pretty much started giving up on life, and she would just eat whatever she wanted, drank whatever she wanted. And, she was in poor health, and it was just like, hey, I give up. And when she survived this, and then we found out all these things after that, she lives for her kids. She lives for my dad. She lives to see my two little ones, that we got now. And she's got a purpose. And here's 5 years later, she's still with us. I just feel like maybe it was something also with your dad that, because when that happened with your dad, I told him, like, Kev, don't do the show. He's like, no, I got to do it. It's, just it'll help me get through it. And the same thing when I put my dog down, it was 3 hours before our show. And Kev's like, don't do the show. And I'm like, no, Kev, I said, just please don't bring it up, though. And we did the show as if nothing happened. The shows always were therapy. The shows were always an escape. And that's why, I know Mish says it, I say it, John says it. What we do is not only an escape for everybody who tunes in, but it's an escape for us as well. But you have to have a good balance of what is an escape. You can't make everything your escape. And I think that's what
the problem.
Did him in. I think that's what did him in.
And it must have been very hard. Look, I imagine it must have been very hard for him to see, to do shows with people who then would get off the air with him, and they have wives and they have something they have to do tonight, or they're going to go somewhere, or maybe they're going on vacation. And for him not to have any of that, I recognize that. Of course, that's very sad and that's very frustrating. But you have to be a self-starter. You can't just pity for yourself all the time and just say, well, I'm just going to give up. Because there was plenty of reasons for this person to not succumb to this.
Yeah,
and they chose it anyway. And that's possibly where my calmness about all this comes from. I'm eerily calm, but at the same token, this is a heavy, heavy burden.
Yeah.
to carry. Tomorrow is going to be worse, and the next day is going to be worse. And, you know, like this is as good as it's going to get for a while, you know, unfortunately. And there's so many logistical things that need to happen.
Yeah.
So for me, I just want to say to the people that, you know, who cared about him and who gave him attention and who gave him a sense of purpose, thank you. You know, and really, like it definitely facilitated his life. Like it really he took it to heart. You know what I mean? But also, if you are not taking care of yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, you know, if you are distant from everybody and all you do is listen to podcasts and get into arguments with people online, you know, please take some type of social inventory on yourself, because, you know, this is not a way to live. This should be a part of life, not life.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, and, you know, he's just surrounded by all these people who had so much more. And I'm sure that was very hard for him. I'm sure it was very, very hard for him. But the reality is Kevin had a lot of opportunity to move forward in life, and he just couldn't, unfortunately, get it together.
I'll say this, Mish, be very, very proud how much joy you gave to that man over the years. John, be very, very proud. He truly, truly cared, because like Mish said, you always brought up in countless stories that he talked about. All of you online, Patreon, YouTuber, you know, Soupy, you know, be very, very proud that by you appreciating the shows and interacting and showing that you cared, that made him incredibly happy. When everybody reached out, when he had that scare in the hospital, he was just so blown away by the response. You know, thank you to all of you, because you gave him joy, even though in the end we still lost him. You know, take, you know, solace to know that you gave that man an incredible amount of joy. You gave him escape. And I don't want to say this like this, but without all of you, without Mish, without the shows, Lord knows where he would be, where he would have been a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Maybe his life would have been completely different, and maybe it'd be, you know, the specimen of, you know, perfection. But I don't think, and I'm sorry if this sounds selfish, I think despite what happened, I think what he did for the last 30 years, probably, although it's a double-edged sword, probably gave him a hell of a lot more happiness than just sitting at home, watching cable, being alone, you know, and just, you know, yes, you have your cats, but then just going on every day while everybody else is doing stuff and you're doing nothing. I mean, this could have ended a much more tragic way many, many years ago. And I think at minimum, I think the positivity that people gave, and no one should feel guilty. No one in your family, not you, John, no one should feel guilty, because at the end of the day, Kev Scandato did what Kev Scandato wanted to do. And, you know, unfortunately, that balance wasn't there. But this is a learning lesson. And trust me, I think Kev, if he's looking down on everybody right now, he's probably telling all of you, listen, you know, smile when you think of my name. Don't look at me as a tragedy. You'll learn from me. Because guess what? For 20 years, we've been learning from Kev Castle, you know, with his knowledge, with his stories, with his laughter, with his happiness. I still have people tell me to this day, oh my God, the Minority episode when you was talking about candy and this and that. Like, it's just like, we were just talking about candy, but just the way, you know, we talked about it. And, you know, it's just, like I said, at another time in the future, you know, when the time is right, we will definitely have more of a tribute show, because I'm sure people are going to want to send in, you know, maybe little clips, just, you know, something. I know there's already some people in wrestling that want to do that. So, and for all of you out there that privately and publicly said what you said earlier, trust me, it just it means a lot. I tell you, I don't want to single anybody out, but I'll do it. I saw right before we went live, Corey Graves, like express condolences, and trust me, sometimes we were a little bit critical about Corey Graves, but at the end of the day, we always gave a shit about him, and he knew, and he was one of the first people to just go out there and say, my thoughts. It just
I didn't see that actually.
Yeah. No, there's a few, but I want everybody to remember Kev for all of the good that he brought into this world, in whether it's through podcasting, wrestling, talking about the Mets, talking about just real life, just learn from it. I think that would make Kev incredibly happy if he can help others. He helped cats and he helped strays, and that was not an exaggeration. That was authentic. And that guy, helped helped animals who depended on others, and, learn from that and grow from that. To this day, I have relatives who say to me, that's your grandmother, or that's your this. And like, I carry on. I even, we were talking about a wrestler who lost a relative recently, and he just adored this relative. And I said to him privately, I said, I don't need to tell you this, but you carry on that person's legacy in the good that you do in the future. And trust me, we will carry on Kev's legacy and celebrate. But at the same time, this is definitely a message that, this is, you don't want to have, what happened to him happen to you, because I can guarantee you, nobody, not me, nobody, not John, Mish, anybody out there wanted Kev to go out this way. And, we, like Mish said earlier, we could always look back and say, oh, I wish I would have done this more. I wish we would have done an intervention. I wish I could have helped this. I wish I'd have, but, at the end of the day, this is Kev, basically living his life the way he wanted. And unfortunately, it took him at 56 years old. He was going to be 57 in June, I believe.
In June, yeah, the birthday coming up. Yeah. Well, listen, thank you to everybody in the chat. I see all your messages, and it's I'm very grateful that I could pass some of this on to my family, and it's going to be a very hard road. It's going to be very difficult. We still don't know what we're doing, as a family just yet. That's going to obviously be private, but thank you, DT, and thank you, Mish, not just for tonight, but you guys really, you made such a tremendous impact on his life, and you gave him the vehicles, you helped build the vehicles, that he got to use to really feel good about himself, and at the end of the day, as much as I could be in a disagreement with some of the choices he made. This was somebody who got a lot of love from these vehicles. He got a lot of real support from real people that was very important to him. I just wish he had these other great things in his life.
Yeah.
That you guys have, that I have. Because that's really what sustains you, is something we all know. At the end of the day, is that's really what sustains us. Having somebody with an anime pic tell you you're cool is nice, but having, what I'm saying, but it's there's something about that real interaction and stuff like that, and it's gonna weigh heavy on me for a very long time. I'm not a young person, so it's these burdens that we have to carry. It's gonna be very, very hard. But I'm very grateful that I got to share this with you two in particular tonight. I think it was the right thing to do, and I think it was with the right people. So thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you to both of you.
John, thank you,
John. Please send my condolences to your family. Like I said, if there's anything I could do in any way, I definitely want to talk to you tomorrow about something. Nothing bad.
I'll talk to you guys offline.
Yeah,
tomorrow.
and Kev Castle leaves an incredible void, not just in the podcasting world, but just in our lives, because he truly was a friend. I mean, I can't put it any other way. He just truly was a friend, and I will tell you, this is kind of like, all right, whatever, but I will forever be grateful and thankful that we cleared the air and got back together 2 years ago. Because if we still wouldn't have been talking and I would have heard this news, I would have been like, nah, man, that's not the way that this should have, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just incredibly grateful that the last time we had a conversation was yesterday, talking about, the WrestleMania prediction show, and we were going to do, that Sunday.
Somebody said it in the chat, and there was a mention on the last soup where he was talking about, burying the hatchet and rebuilding old bridges and stuff.
Yeah.
And he was very thankful to you, DT, for him, reconciling with you, over the years and stuff like that. And I really do think, and I saw other people mention it too, that was one of the things that, Kevin did seem like he wanted us to all kind of forget, the past and just kind of move forward. And it hits so hard now because the time that we all talk together, is to mention that our friend, our brother has fallen.
Yeah.
And it's deep. I'm trying to keep it together. I'm not a
I know.
Totally get it.
I mean, I love you, John. Thank you so much for being
I
a
love you,
part of the
brother.
shows, for being a part of my life, man. And your brother was an amazing person to me. He had never steered me wrong, and we all butt heads. We've all butted heads.
Of course.
And
that's life.
Thank you, DT. Without you, I would have never known Kevin Castle at all. It was because of those early days of the Minority Report.
Thank you too, because
I wanted to be a part of the show.
Yeah.
And I joined with you guys many years ago.
Yeah.
And I loved your stories. I loved his stories. I loved the dynamic that existed back in 2003 and beyond, obviously, for the many years that we all were together. It's just
good times.
It's very heavy to think that somebody I've known.
Yeah.
It's for as long as I have is not with us, and so suddenly. And I mean, this, I obviously, it's fresh for all of us, but I can't even believe I'm having this conversation.
But you want to know what's beautiful? You want to know what's beautiful? You want to know what's beautiful? Not to interrupt. What's beautiful? What's beautiful is that we have 20 plus years of DTKC shows that have not been deleted. I have about 15 years of shows that have been offline that, we could put online and maybe do something where, donate to like a cat charity or something. Mish, you have all your soup episodes for, years upon years of having Kev on. Patreon has 8 years of Kev doing solo shows, doing shows with Trez, doing shows with you back in the day. There is so much. Kev's voice will always be kept alive. This is not someone that you forget about, and then you look back 5-10 years and like, oh man, I can't believe it. Yes, it's tragic, but we celebrate because there's so much of his impact that will never die. His voice will never die. Those episodes, those voice, those rants, that never dies. We have it. And yes, there won't be anything new unless we somehow get some AI going. But, we can celebrate and always be reminded, like when we really start getting down about Kev, you pull up something. One thing I could say, the guy was never malicious, man. Always wanted to see people smile. Always wanted. You said a bad thing about a friend of his, and he would eat you alive. He always wanted everybody to smile. And like John said earlier, Kev would have wanted us to come up here tonight and talk about this, because guess what?
Oh,
You know,
100%.
Guess what? This is not a Patreon plug, but for anyone out there that ever tuned into at least the last 6 months, Kev's solo shows on Patreon, basically these types of conversations is what he was having with our Patreon audience. And the funny thing is, he was trying to help everybody out there, from Kyle to this person, and this person, and this person, and just always looked out for everybody. So that's one beautiful thing that I will always cherish, is his voice will stay alive. There is so much out there that we can always go back to and enjoy. It's kind of like when you lose relatives and you look at home movies. You look at, little recordings you did on your iPhone. Like I got, for real, on the holidays with my dad. And my dad, the last 2 years, has been having this kick talking about all these gangster stories from back in the day when, this guy showed up at his house and wanted to kill him and this and that. And he talks about, going to New Orleans and he's hanging out with Lawrence Taylor and John Gotti and this and that. And I'm standing with my phone on my side. And at one point, my father looks at me like, "Are you fucking recording me?" And I'm like, no. And I have it. So like, I know in the future, I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at that and see my father in his mode doing what he does. And it's going to just bring me incredible joy. So Kev's voice lives on, and hopefully what we talked about tonight, might help somebody out there. And I think that's what Kev would have wanted.
Yeah, for sure.
Much love to you guys.
And the Mets have to win the World Series.
Yes. Mets have to win the World Series. Absolutely.
Right. Well, thank you guys so much. Obviously, I'll be speaking to both of you privately tomorrow.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
Right. Thank you, Bish.
All right, guys.
Thank you, John. Be well.
Much love to everybody for allowing me on, too. So
thank you for coming on. Take care.
Bye, TT.
Take care. All right, everybody. I'm going to jet, and it's I can't add anything to this. My sincere thoughts and prayers are with John and his entire family. I feel so awful for his mom, because you always hear like a parent never wants to bury their kid. And I'm absolutely going to miss him. Did shows with him for over 20 years, but it was much more than just the shows. And let me tell you guys, we absolutely always look forward to doing these shows. And I felt so awful that he was going through what he was going through 6 weeks ago, but I never in a million years ever thought that I would be doing this show today, talking about this. I even told John earlier, I even told a few people online, I've made these thumbnails for people who have passed away, in wrestling for the last 2 years. And it gutted me that, I'm doing this for not only my longtime co-host, but my friend. And yes, if we're talking about the shows for a minute, a legacy died today also. There will never be another Don, Tony, and Kevin Castle show episode. There will be no more new DTKC show content. Things change now. Things change. Now for our Patreon family, I am definitely going to be doing a show tomorrow. I think it's just going to be just talking about life. Don't expect any wrestling talk tomorrow. I'm not watching Raw. I am not watching AEW. Right now it's about burying Kev. My thoughts are with Trez, because she absolutely loved that guy. You brought Kev so much fucking joy. Trust me, you brought him so much joy. Chicky, who I never ever talked to or met before, if she hears this, he absolutely loved talking those episodes with you, and always said, we're going to be bringing it back. We're going to be bringing it back. These were an escape for him, much more than we would have ever thought. That's the thing. These were an escape. You know, like we always hear from a lot of you out there, oh, these shows are an escape for us. This is an escape for me. We have somebody live right now, Don Stoney, who lives overseas, and his house burned down. And it was all over the news. It was real tragic. And, you know, the shows are an escape. This is an escape. This is an escape. We always said these shows were an escape for us. And now, you know, we understand how much of an escape you guys were for Kev. Everybody that wrestles, everybody that's ever performed, you were an incredible escape for Kev. And trust me, I told a few of you privately tonight, and I wasn't just exaggerating. I wasn't just trying to make anybody feel good. Kev always spoke highly of everybody. There's literally, I mean, honestly, there's nobody that I'm, you know, like social with or commenting with that he talked bad about. He was very, very loyal to his friends. Didn't backstab anyone, always put other people before him. And I'm going to miss him. I'm absolutely going to miss him. You know, like, but this is also a very touchy issue too, because like I said, we have about 15 years of shows that have been offline. And there's various reasons why they've been offline. One, when we had the falling out, it was too expensive to have, you know, 18 years, 17 years of content, you know, and hosting out there. I can't afford it. But there was also, you know, hey, we're not talking, why am I going to go out of my way? Then when we got back together, you know, we were talking about putting old shows back online. I definitely am going to put all of the shows back online. I don't want to do it and profit off of it, because some people will definitely make an accusation there. I might even do something that, you know, if people make a donation to some charity, I'll send them like a Dropbox link to get access to all the shows. I don't know. We got plenty of time to do that, but you know, I will make sure that his voice does not fade away. And as far as me going forward, Mondays are not going to be the same, man. Mondays are not going to be the same. It's going to be weird. It's going to be weird. And I'll tell you, even though we had a falling out for a couple of years, we still did it together for about, 18 years. And I always wanted the shows to be fun. And the same thing with Kev also. I always wanted them to be fun. And I always wanted to make sure that Kev was comfortable and he was having a good time. I didn't want it to be stressful, even before he had these health issues. I'm not, outside of those 2 years, this is like the first time that anything that I do, I don't have him, there. Kev, you want to do this today? Kev, you want to do this Sunday? Kev, you want to do a special episode? Kev, you want to do this? You want to do predictions? You want to do a recap? This is definitely different. And you know what hurts the most? For the 2-3 years that Kev and I did not talk, even though we were doing our own thing, there was always people trying to get us back together. I always credited Monty and the Pharaoh. Hundreds of people tried to get us back together. But I always remember them trying to convince us in any way for us to get back together doing the shows. And I had told Mike, I said, listen, if I do shows with someone, I got to like them. They got to be my friend. And I'm not going to just do a show just to, and that's how much Kev and I cared, that if we were not copacetic with each other, then we were not doing a show together. Here, a little fact for anybody that's curious. When we had that falling out for 3 years, we never stopped doing our Patreon channel together. Despite us not talking to each other, he still did his shows. I still did my shows. I still sent him the questions. He still did what he did, because Kevin and I, even though we weren't talking, right at the beginning of our falling out, we said, look, our Patreon family is the ones who invest in us more than anybody else, because they help us pay bills. They help us keep everything going. And we are absolutely not going to hurt them and screw them out of hearing us do what we do. So even though we weren't doing shows together, we still did shows on the channel together. And, but still, even for those years that Monday nights were just, a solo show for me, always in the back of my mind, like, Kevin and I got to get back together. Maybe one day Kevin and I will be back together. Maybe one day, maybe you're right. And things started to calm down. And I remember one day I'm like, Kev, you want to do a show again? Yeah, why not? Let's do it. And it just felt right. It just felt right. This is the first time since 2002, 2003, that even if I wanted to do a show with Kev, I can't. And that's really what hurts the most as far as the shows. This is the first time since I know him that if I really want to do a show with him, I can't, because he's not here anymore. Whew. I haven't checked Twitter in a few hours. I haven't checked DMs. It's going to be incredibly hard to get back to everybody out there. But one thing I will tell everybody, few people asked me this earlier, and I'm going to talk to John about this tomorrow. I know a lot of you that have gone to wakes, they give you like a little, card, when you're leaving the funeral home. I'm going to ask John, and I'm going to pay for it, obviously, but I'm going to ask John to make up like 500 of them for me. And whatever it costs, I'm going to pay for it. But the reason being is because there's quite a few of you out there, and trust me, it's not just, if you're a patron, you get one. No. There's a lot of you out there who have touched this man's life. And, if I could send you at least that, for you to keep, to cherish, and just a reminder, trust me, I have every single one. I have Chris Candido still. I have Jimmy Hustlers. I have my grandmothers, my grandfathers, my cousins, my friends. I got Billy Reels. I have everybody's, tribute that was given to them, somewhere on a piece of paper. But I have them all. And believe it or not, just a little comment, and some of you may find this weird, but in my car, in my visor, where they have the mirror, I have my mass card, or the funeral card, of my grandmother who died in 1991. I always keep it with me that she's protecting me. And I will take an iPhone video and show everybody if you don't believe me. It's just things that you do, and I'm going to ask John if he could get that for me. So, I think 500 is a reasonable amount, because I know there's already about 200-300 of you out there that I know would absolutely want one. So, we'll see, but, just keep in mind again, the way I wrote it on social media earlier on Twitter, I apologize for sounding vague. I promise you it was not to get clicks. It was not to get hits. It was not, John had told me that his mom didn't even know yet. And, you don't know who out there knows and doesn't know. So I wanted to tell everyone, but it was not my place to do it yet. And Kev absolutely would have wanted us to come up here. I'm sure Kev, is looking down, and guess what? He's with Chris, and he's with his dad, and he's with all of those cats who perished a little over a week ago. He is with all of his friends, you know, in the music scene. The bartender that passed away recently that he paid tribute to, he's up there. And Kev, I am so sorry. And I mean this sincerely. I am so fucking sorry if I contributed in any way to make you feel pressured that you had to be somebody that you weren't. It didn't matter if you were 5'5" or 7'5". It wouldn't have mattered if you were 110 pounds or 200 pounds or 300 pounds or 400 pounds. It didn't matter if you were transgender. It wouldn't matter if you were black, white, straight, gay, Asian. It wouldn't matter if you had 10 toes, 15 toes. It wouldn't have mattered. You know, we all had our flaws and we all have our faults, and nobody's perfect out there. And, you know, I do feel a little guilty. I make no mistake about it. I do feel guilty because back in the day with those shows, I would make a lot of little wise-ass remarks. And sometimes they were directed towards him, but it was out of frustration. It was out of frustration. Lucky 13, he should have been there. I had diverticulitis surgery right before that. And I said, ain't no fucking way I'm not going to make that. He told us he had to work, and there was no way he could get out of it, and he could have been fired because of it. What are you going to do, call him a liar? But deep down inside, I feel guilty because that night was such a special night. And now I feel like I tormented that guy. Now I feel like every time I brought it up, I tormented him because he wanted to be there. He absolutely wanted to be there and didn't because he thought people were going to make fun of him. Kev, you were a very, very special man. You had a heart, even though that heart went out today. That heart was, let me put it this way, they probably will accuse you of doing steroids because that heart was much bigger than mine or anybody else's out there. You were a very good person, and you definitely put smiles on, dare I say, millions of faces over the years. You're a very, very good person, and whatever guilt or flaws that you've, you know, felt that you had that prevented you from, you know, living a little bit differently, you know, you're at peace now. You're at peace. You know, you're at peace. And I can only imagine how his family feels. You know, I don't want to spend any more time here, but, you know, my thoughts are with his family because you could hear it in John. They all loved him immensely. And it must be so hard to see somebody that you love, that you know you can help, and you can't. You can't. And, you know, I'm going to miss him. I know a lot of you out there are going to miss him as well. And, you know, we'll definitely do a tribute show in the near future. As far as Patreon tomorrow, listen, I'm pulling a Kev Castle right now. I am absolutely doing one tomorrow night because that's going to be a little bit of therapy for me to be able. Why do you think I'm talking right now the last 10, 15 minutes? It's like I don't want to go off the air because I want to keep talking how much I truly gave a shit about this guy, and he was such a good guy. So it is therapy for me also. So I will definitely be up tomorrow. I'm not going to be talking wrestling tomorrow, so we're not going to do any DM questions or anything like that. We'll just, if you want to join me live tomorrow in the Patreon chat, talk a little bit more, we can, but, you know, I'll give anybody some updates tomorrow as well. But listen, I want to make this clear before I go. I don't want anybody out there to think that because they're not a patron or a channel member on YouTube or anything else that you're not going to get updates. That is not true. Anything that I can share, I will definitely post on social media. And in the near future, we will definitely pay tribute. We'll do a tribute show to Kev, and we'll definitely talk again. Right now, it's more of mourning than anything else. It's a mourning process, and just letting everybody know what happened. And I tell you, it's creepy to think that I'm the last person that he talked to. It's just, man, the DM he sent me earlier, I honestly thought, okay, some chest pains. He's just going to go get checked out, make sure he's okay. And he passed away shortly thereafter. I did not know that he didn't make it to the hospital. And he DM'd me like around, I think, 1:30 today, 1:35. And based on talking to John earlier, he was gone like almost right after that. So just sucks that he's not going to see the Mets win another World Series. He's not going to see WrestleMania. Well, he'll be looking down. But, man, if you would have told me last Monday that would have been the last show that Kev and I would have ever done, we absolutely would not have finished the show that quickly. We would have done a 5-6 hour show. Kev, you can't hang up. Can't be like a Nightmare on Elm Street. You go to sleep and that's it. No. We're going to keep doing it. We'd still be doing a show a week later. He was so excited yesterday. I sent him the thumbnail for the prediction show. And he's like, yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to it. Who do you think? You think Randy Orton's going to do this and this and that? And I'm like, yeah, I think so. Believe it. Look, the thumbnail that we were going to use tonight, it was based on a little bit of a conversation we had yesterday. We were going to talk more about Randy Orton, but we were going to talk about Getty Images, that story that broke today, and we were going to have some fun with it. We were going to talk about some great topics tonight. And, man, I'm going to miss him. Going to miss doing the shows with him. Going to miss sending him the questions every Thursday for Patreon. I'm going to miss that download link that he would send me at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I would see the file. I'm like, Kev, what'd you do, a fucking 6-hour show? Holy shit. Yeah, I know. We started talking. I'm like, Kev, the doctors told you got to get sleep. Yeah, I know, but we had such a good conversation. And he loved all of you out there, man. I know the balance was off based on what we said earlier, but whether you're somebody that wrestles on TV, whether it's somebody that wrestled 30 years ago, whether it's somebody from Patreon, somebody from YouTube, somebody that crossed his paths on social media, whether it's somebody that just posted a random comment, even just, thanks, Kev, love the show. It meant everything to him. And take solace in knowing, despite what happened today, you made that man happy. Despite what happened to him, and despite this imbalance that we talked about, one thing that we all could look back and smile is that we all gave him some happiness. The shows gave him happiness. I hope I gave him some happiness. Mish absolutely gave him happiness. John gave him happiness. Maybe they butted heads in recent years, but he still had all those memories of going to Madison Square Garden and going here and going there. Every single one of you that ever crossed his path, mingling, trust me, I guarantee you when he saw that little tweet from Corey Graves earlier, that put an amazing smile on his face, because you heard what he said 2 weeks ago about him. He really appreciated that people appreciated what he said. It just really, really, you all gave him happiness, man. That's the only thing I can say. I mean, I'm going to feel sad. I'm going to miss him. It's going to be freaking weird. Shows go on, obviously. I'm going to still do a prediction show, not in the next couple of days, but I will keep saying to myself, we made that man happy. Maybe we made him too happy, and he just relied on it a little bit too much. But rest in peace, Kev. I hope you all found this somewhat therapeutic. It's the only way I could say this, but rest in peace, Kev. Rest in peace.